Go into the world and tell every man that you meet, there is a man on the cross.
A Catholic Take. What you need to know right now. A bold synthesis of inspiration and information. Keeping you up to date on the news and issues from a courageous Catholic perspective.
A Catholic Take with Joe McLean starts now.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean. So good to be on with you. Praise be to God. A Pope Francis versus the Catholics in the Trump administration. And if you look at a chart, and I can link to one in the show notes if you want, it's like 40% of the Trump administration is Catholic. It's the biggest single block religiously affiliated by far. And, of course, J.D. Vance's comments on Fox News earlier this past week, you know, it has sparked a controversy to say the least. Now, Pope Francis has sent a letter to the bishops in the United States pushing back on the Trump administration immigration policy. I want to cover that for you at 14 past the hour because some of the Catholics in the Trump administration are not putting up with it. And we're going to be playing some clips for you at 14 past the hour. Lots of stories there to get into, of course. And then, as we talked about, I think it was at the end of last week, beginning of this week, maybe, I don't know. But Forbes has come out and said the largest recipient of USAID funding was, in fact, Catholic Relief Services, to the tunes of billions with a B. Well, the Vatican is not happy about that. They've pushed back. They don't want to see that money go away. They say that people will die as a result to that money not showing up anymore. So I want to have a conversation about the Trump administration immigration policy, USAID funding, all of this with Dr. Anthony Stein from Return to Tradition at 30 past the hour. We will, of course, put the links in the show notes to everything we discussed
Stein
today
from Return to Tradition at 30 past.
thestationofthecross.com/ACT. So we have a lot to get to today. Don't forget tonight, the very last session in the Bible study. It all happens tonight, 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. If you want access to session number 13, the end of the road of our Bible study on salvation history, then you got to be on the email list. Go to thestationofthecross.com and /ACT. Smash that email sign up. Just takes a moment. I'll be sending the email out with the Zoom link later today. So if you want access, you want to hang out with us one last time, then get on that email list today. Thestationofthecross.com /ACT. By the way, did you hear Rep. Anna Paulina is running a JFK assassination investigation? Isn't that interesting? We live in interesting times, to say the least. Let's pray. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thine intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, I fly unto thee, O Virgin of Virgins, my mother. To thee do I come, before thee I stand, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petitions, but in thy mercy hear and answer me. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. And now your saint of the day.
The 7 holy founders of the Order of Servants of Mary, or Servites. Pray for us. In the year of our Lord 1233, on the Feast of the Assumption, the Blessed Virgin Mary appeared after Holy Mass to 7 young men in Florence, Italy. The men were all members of the Laudesi, a confraternity for nobles and merchants devoted to the Blessed Mother. Their names were Bonfilius Monaldi, Bonagiunta Manetti, Manetus de Lantella, Amadeus de Amadei, Hugo Lippi, Gerard Sostegni, and Alexis Falconieri. All but Alexis would eventually become priests. Our Lady directed the men to retire from the world, which they did together on the Feast of her Nativity. On a visit to obtain their bishop's blessing, they were hailed as servants of Mary by a crowd of children, including the very young Philip Benizi, who had become one of the order's greatest saints. On Good Friday in the year 1240, Our Lady gave the founders their black habit or scapular, and confirmed their name and mission under the rule of St. Augustine. Only Alexis, whose niece St. Juliana Falconieri would found the Third Order of Servites, lived to see the canonical approval of this fifth mendicant order, on February 11th, 1304. In the modern calendar, the founders are celebrated on February 17th, the day St. Alexis entered heaven. For more about this day and others in the Church's calendar, visit thestationofthecross.com/saints-and-seasons. 7 Holy Servite Founders, pray for us.
And now your headline news. Breitbart reports Trump orders end to Biden's green energy regulations. In July of 2023, the Biden administration cracked down on water heaters by slapping them with greater efficiency standards. The following month, Biden then imposed a ban on incandescent light bulbs, limiting what kinds of lighting would be available for consumers. Well, President Trump wrote in a post on social media, quote, "I am hereby instructing Secretary Lee Zeldin to immediately go back to my environmental orders on water standards and flow pertaining to sinks, showers, toilets, washing machines, dishwashers, etc., and to likewise go back to the common sense standards on light bulbs. I look forward to signing these orders." The Hill reports appeals court agrees to toss Mar-a-Lago case. The 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals agreed to dismiss the Mar-a-Lago documents case at the request of the Trump Justice Department, a reversal from the stance under the Biden administration, which was challenging a ruling from U.S. District Judge Eileen Cannon that found special counsel Jack Smith was unlawfully appointed. Lawmakers of the Senate Judiciary Committee recently requested the Mar-a-Lago volume of Jack Smith's report, arguing it was key to their review of Kash Patel's Trump nominee to lead the FBI. I believe that vote is supposed to go up tomorrow. We'll have to see. And Catholic Vote reports maternal mortality rate dropped after pro-life laws. CDC data shows a decline in maternal mortality since 2022 and a decline in infant mortality since 2023, according to pro-life researcher Michael New, who also said, quote, "Overall, it is sad but unsurprising that many media outlets have chosen to downplay the positive public health trends that have occurred since getting rid of Roe v. Wade, the post-Dobbs decision." Those are your headline news. The gospel today comes to us from Mark chapter 7, verses 14 through 23. And calling again the multitude unto him, Jesus said to them, "Hear ye me all, and understand. There is nothing from without a man that entering into him can defile him. But the things which come from a man, those are they that defile a man. If any man have ears to hear, let him hear." And when he was come into the house from the multitude, his disciples asked him the parable, and he saith to them, "So are you also without knowledge? Understanding you not that everything from without entering into a man cannot defile him, because it entereth not into his heart, but goeth into the belly, and goeth out into the privy, it purging all meats?" But he said, "That the things which come out from a man, they defile a man. For from within out of the heart of man proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceits, lasciviousness, and evil eye, blasphemy, pride, foolishness. All these evil things come from within and defile a man." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. The Afflicate would say, but the intention of the Lord in saying this was to teach men that the observing of meats, which the law commands, should not be taken in a carnal sense. And from this he began to unfold to them the intent of the law. The Lord begins by chiding them. Wherefore there follows, "Are ye also without understanding?" I love that, so good. There's so many clues here about understanding the law, which intimates his divinity, that he is the ultimate interpreter of the law. Oh, you thought you knew the law. Let me just tell you what it actually meant. Back in the day when we delivered this law through Moses to the people, but the stiff-necked, hard-hearted knuckleheads in the desert and the wandering just refused to see because they didn't have ears to hear or eyes to see. See, the clues are right there in front of us. The afflicate goes on. Then the Lord shows them what was hidden, saying, do ye not perceive that whatsoever thing from without entereth into the man, it cannot make him common? The Venerable Bede would say, for the Jews, boasting themselves to be the portion of God, all common those meats which all men use as shellfish, hares, and animals, and of that sort. Not even, however, what is offered to idols is unclean, in as far as it is food and God's creature. It is the invocation of devils which makes it unclean. And he adds the cause of it, saying, because it entereth not into his heart. The principal seat of the soul, according to Plato, is the brain, but according to Christ, it is the heart. Gloss would say, it says, therefore, into his heart, that is, into his mind, which is the principal part of the soul on which his whole life depends. Wherefore it is necessary that according to the state of his heart, a man should be called clean or unclean, and thus whatsoever does not reach the soul cannot bring pollution, which is why St. Peter was given the vision of the sheet there in Joppa with all the meats. Rise, slaughter, eat. Oh, but Lord, I don't want to be undefiled. Stop it, you knucklehead. Rise, slaughter, eat. Check your heart, for where your heart is, there is your treasure. Which is why when you die, when I die, our heart is going to be checked. Oh, you want hell? Well, enjoy hell forever, because that's where your heart is. It's choosing the world, the flesh, and the devil over the good, the true, and the beautiful. We must make choices, and those choices have consequences, and we must be prepared to live our choice for all eternity. So choose wisely. We'll be right back. We have a lot to get to. Don't go anywhere. Cheers with a friend.
Did you know you can help evangelize simply by using your cell phone? The Station of the Cross is partnering with iCatholic Mobile, America's only Catholic mobile phone company. When you join iCatholic Mobile, a portion of every dollar will support our programming. Plus, you'll enjoy great service with iCatholic Unlimited 5G data, text, and talk. With iCatholic Mobile, you can stay connected with family and friends while also spreading the truth of Jesus Christ with clarity and charity. Join today at iCatholicMobile.com.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain. So good to be on with you. Praise be to God. Coming up at 30 past the hour, Dr. Anthony Stein from Return to Tradition is going to be on the program. Forbes reported that the number two recipient of USAID funding to the tune of $30 billion with the B was Catholic Relief Services. Very interesting, which is why the Vatican is not at all happy to be losing the funding. But as we've reported very extensively, that Catholic Relief Services has participated in many programs that perpetuated abortion, contraception, perverse sexual teaching to young girls especially. And all of it is very well documented, receipts in tow. We've had those conversations with Michael Hitchborn. But we're going to get Dr. Anthony Stein to weigh in on that story, as well as what is going down in the Pope's response to the Trump administration's immigration policy. In fact, there's a story out that he's just appointed a new Archbishop of Detroit who wants excommunications to be considered for all Catholics in the Trump administration who are enforcing this immigration policy. Let that sink in. They want to excommunicate the Catholics who enforce the law. Didn't see any excommunications for the pro-abortion, pro-gay marriage, pro-IVF, pro-in vitro fertilization administration that just left office. But now we're talking excommunications. Okay. Like 40% of the Trump cabinet is Catholic. 40%. In fact, Tom Homan, he recently came out in response to what the Pope had to say. Have a listen to this.
The Pope this morning had some very harsh words for the...
I got harsh words for the Pope. Pope wants to fix the Catholic Church. I'm saying this as a lifelong Catholic. I was baptized Catholic. I was First Communion as a Catholic. Confirmation as a Catholic. You ought to fix the Catholic Church and concentrate on his word and leave border enforcement to us. He wants to attack us for securing our border. He's got a wall around the Vatican, does he not? So he's got a wall around to protect his people and himself, but we can't have a wall around the United States. So I wish he'd stick to the Catholic Church and fix that and leave border enforcement to us.
You know, it's funny. I've been to the Vatican a few times. And in fact, there is a wall there, a very large wall. As a matter of fact, a very thick, very tall wall that surrounds the city. And good luck grabbing a sleeping bag and climbing that wall and having a nap in the Vatican Gardens. See what will happen to you if you ever tried that. They're not going to tolerate that at the Vatican because the walls are thick for a reason. In fact, there's an escape route that goes from the Vatican along the top of a wall all the way down to a castle so that the Pope has in the past escaped when surrounded by armies. That's actually been used and has not been used in a while, but nonetheless, it exists for a reason. But somehow, some way, those Catholics in the Trump administration are not allowed to enforce this, or else they face canonical penalties. Well, before I read parts of the letter from Pope Francis that he's issued to you, I would like to play one more time the commentary from J.D. Vance in the Fox News segment, which I'm going to link to, of course. Have a listen to this.
But there's this old school, and I think it's a very Christian concept, by the way, that you love your family, and then you love your neighbor, and then you love your community, and then you love your fellow citizens in your own country, and then after that, you can focus and prioritize the rest of the world. A lot of the far left has completely inverted that. They seem to hate the citizens of their own country and care more about people outside their own borders. That is no way to run a society.
Totally agree. I think that's common sense. That makes natural law, obviously common sense in the land. And I don't know why we would have problems with that. If I neglected my children to go feed homeless, starving kids some other place, I would be doing a good for those kids some other place, but I would be doing an injustice. I would lack charity for my own children. So you have to prioritize. It's just like triage, right? When I was in the Marine Corps and we went to Marine Combat School, we were given CPR training for combat situations. If a soldier gets shot in the chest and while falling to the earth happens to break his arm, you don't start by mending the broken arm. You deal with the sucking chest wound that might take his life if you don't act incredibly quickly. It's just common sense. You deal with the most serious issues first, and then you get to the others. The others aren't, not important. They are. You have to set that broken arm. You have to make sure that it can mend properly so he can go on to fight another day. But it's not the biggest and most important issue. So we must set first things first. It seems like J.D. Vance understands this, but let's have a look at this letter that came from the Vatican yesterday that seems to say something else from His Holiness Pope Francis. It says, "Dear brothers in the episcopate, I'm writing today to address a few words to you in these delicate moments that you are living as pastors of the people of God who walk together in the United States." Now, I'm not going to read this entire letter to you. It's not even that long. I am going to link to it at thestationofthecross.com/ACT in the show notes today. But there are a couple of paragraphs that I kind of want to just focus on. Paragraph number 2, for instance. "These words with which I begin are not an artificial construct. Even a cursory examination of the Church's social doctrine emphatically shows that Jesus Christ is the true Emmanuel. He did not live apart from the difficult experience of being expelled from his own land because of an imminent risk to his life, and from the experience of having to take refuge in a society and a culture foreign to his own." Well, let me just ask a question real quick. Exactly when? Can you just point to me where in the gospel Jesus was expelled from his country? I just couldn't seem to find that in the New Testament, where he was expelled from his country. Yes, Joseph was warned in a dream about Herod, and then, of course, he took out of prudence his job very seriously to protect, to provide for the Holy Family. So he, of course, took them to safety, but they were never expelled. There was never an expulsion from his country, never once. Also, it would seem that although he did, in fact, take refuge in Egypt at Alexandria, he didn't break any laws in the process of doing so. He didn't cross a border illegally. There was, in fact, a large Jewish community in Alexandria. It is in Alexandria that we get the Septuagint version of the Bible, in fact, the Old Testament, which is the Greek version, which is why the Latin Vulgate that I have and the Douay Rheims, which is based on the Latin Vulgate was based on the Septuagint. The Septuagint includes all of the Old Testament books, not some of them, as your Protestant brothers and sisters have now deleted, excluded, and ignored. The Septuagint has all of them. But nonetheless, I digress. He didn't break any laws to go to Alexandria. He went there legally. At no time was he an illegal immigrant. But anyway, it goes on. The Son of God, in becoming man, also chose to live the drama of immigration. I like to recall, among other things, the words with which Pope Pius XII began his apostolic constitution on the care of migrants, which is considered the Magna Carta of the Church's thinking, and he goes on to quote that. But I want to skip to paragraph 4. I have followed closely the major crisis that is taking place in the United States with the initiation of a program of mass deportations. The rightly formed conscience cannot fail to make a critical judgment and express its disagreement with any measure that tacitly or explicitly identifies the illegal status of some immigrants with criminality. If they came here, if the law says you can't just cross our border without checking in with Customs and Border Protection first, and you ignore that and do it anyway, you have actually broken the law. That is a crime. Therefore, the criminality with your immigration status is legit. But nonetheless, I guess we're not allowed to focus on those details. It goes on. At the same time, one must recognize the right of a nation to defend itself and keep communities safe from those who have committed violent or serious crimes while in the country or prior to arrival. All right, I like that. Praise be to God. It goes on. That said, the act of deporting people who in many cases have left their own land for reasons of extreme poverty, insecurity, exploitation, persecution, or serious deterioration of the environment damages the dignity of many men and women and of entire families and places them in a state of particular vulnerability and defenselessness. So, do we have a need? Do we have a reason that we should ignore our laws and the drain on the resources that are available to help these people in a careless way? Or should we have order so that we can be in a position to more successfully care for these people while not ignoring our own needs? It's like on the airplane, when the plane is descending at 10,000 feet a second and they drop those masks, you are told to put yours on first and then help the person next to you. Because if you pass out, you can't help anybody. Seems like a common sense principle. Well, last night, Dr. Taylor Marshall addressed this. I want to play just this clip of him reading from the Catechism on this. Have a listen.
Here is what the Catechism of the Catholic Church says. Quote, political authorities, for the sake of the common good for which they are responsible, may make the exercise of the right to immigrate subject to various juridical conditions, especially with regard to the immigrant's duties towards their country of adoption. Immigrants are obliged to respect with gratitude the material and spiritual heritage of the country that receives them, to obey its laws, and to assist in carrying civic burdens, end quote, paragraph 2241.
Paragraph 2241. So in all of this, it would seem that we have a situation where you have two sides lining up. You have His Holiness Pope Francis and those bishops that oppose any sort of ordered immigration policy, and those bishops that, of course, are understanding that there is some common sense immigration policy that we should be supporting, order instead of chaos. You might be thinking of Bishop Strickland, and so am I, because he's amazing, praise be to God, but he's not alone in that. Joseph Naumann has come out from the Archdiocese of Kansas City in Kansas. You know, not somebody who rocks the boat, not somebody who likes to tip the apple cart, so to speak, and create drama and chaos. What he is saying in this statement, I'm going to link to it for you, that we need, and I'll quote, those elected to lead our nation are responsible to protect the integrity of our country and keep safe the citizens of the United States. Allowing violent gangs Individuals with serious criminal histories, dealers of lethal drugs, human traffickers, and those who pose threats to our national security to enter our country and harm U.S. citizens is a serious dereliction of duty by our elected leaders. I commend President Trump, the bishop says, and those in his administration for addressing this serious national threat. Kind of reminds me of that how's that phrase go? When you have kids, it's like, we can never own anything nice. You know, I'm thinking about the video that came out from Colorado and other parts of our country with the gangs that were trying to take over entire apartment complexes. Do you want to live in a neighborhood where the gangs go door to door, raping, molesting, pillaging your home? Would you be okay with that as long as we had open borders and we never turned a blind eye to anybody ever? Or would you prefer order in the midst of chaos, a system in which we can have responsible immigration policies, allowing good guys who need our help to come, and we have the resources and the organization to help them when they need us most? Or you just want, let that border be open and let whatever happens, happens? It seems nefarious and agendized to me. And I think the good bishop from Kansas seems to agree. What do you think? Let me know. But I'm going to link to this in the show notes with all the clips and everything else at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. And on the other side of the break, we're going to have Dr. Anthony Stein from Return to Tradition on the team because I want to get his take on all of this. He covered it on his channel this morning. Plus, we want to talk about the Vatican's not happy about the lack of USAID funds going forward. You lose $1 billion, it can mean some more. Coming next. Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain, and here are your headline news. Daily Wire reports Trump admin secures release of an American imprisoned in Russia. The Trump administration has successfully negotiated the release of American teacher Mark Fogel from a Russian penal colony. Fogel, 63 years old, was given a 14-year prison sentence for possessing medical marijuana in 2021. An employee of the Anglo-American School of Moscow, Fogel spent 27 years teaching overseas and was planning to retire that year when he was arrested. An American doctor prescribed the marijuana after Fogel had surgeries on his back, shoulder, and knee. Fogel's release was negotiated by Trump's special envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff. Fogel was flown out of Russia on Witkoff's private jet. It is unclear what the United States offered in return, though. I guess we're about to find out. Catholic News Agency reports Pope Francis appoints Tucson Bishop Weisenberger as new Archbishop of Detroit. Pope Francis yesterday appointed Tucson Bishop Edward Weisenberger as the new Archbishop of Detroit, accepting the resignation of Alan Vigneron. Vigneron, who led the Michigan Archdiocese since 2009, had submitted his resignation in October of 2023 upon turning 75. Weisenberger notably served as an on-site chaplain at the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing. He was appointed the Bishop of Salina, Kansas in 2012, and then, of course, Tucson in 2017. And now he's advocating for excommunicating Catholics in the Trump admin. Hey, Catholic Vote is reporting that Army recruitment spikes after Trump re-election. After 2 years of failing to meet the recruitment targets, the Army reported historically high enlistment numbers following directly after the president got elected. The Army in December had its most productive recruitment month in 15 years, averaging 346 soldiers a day. Let that sink in. And those are your headline news. Hey, praise be to God in all things. Dr. Anthony Stein joins us this morning. Of course, returntotradition.org. We're going to put a link to him in our show notes today for his website and his YouTube channel, Return to Tradition. Dr. Stein, good morning to you. Thanks for your time.
Back on, Joe. It's good to be here.
So much to talk about. The war between the Vatican and the Trump admin begins, and it's getting very interesting, to say the least. I do want to talk about the funding of USAID, but let me start with getting your commentary on the letter that Pope Francis issued just yesterday.
It's astonishing that a letter like that, telling people essentially that open borders are something you should seriously consider implementing for your country, was issued by somebody who signed a document a month and a half ago putting some draconian punishments for people who illegally enter Vatican City. I was astonished at how tone deaf this was.
Right. Yes,
I
exactly.
think the letter was coordinated with the U.S. bishops. Part of me thinks this wasn't even written by anybody in Rome, that this was written by an unnamed American cardinal who has, Pope Francis's personal email, sent it to him, and then had it okayed. Because the coordination, did you notice how many bishops and the various bishops' conferences in the United States, like Wisconsin was the one I used this morning in my live stream, but a lot of bishops responded lightning quickly. It was amazing how quickly they responded. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, individual bishops, it was as if they knew this was coming. And some of their statements were short, some were not so short, which is why I think this was coordinated.
What I love the most is just the profound hypocrisy of it. And it's not a new argument. This has been going on for a while now. Even during Trump's first administration, the whole argument over border security came up, and then the contrasting that with the Vatican City. I've been to Rome a few times. There's a massive, thick, very tall wall that surrounds Vatican City. And good luck, scaling this wall, sneaking through a gate or whatever, and trying to camp out in the Vatican gardens. It ain't going to go well for you. It's not just the guys with the spears and the feathered helmets that are going to come after you. It's the guys with the earpieces and the suits and the submachine guns under their jackets, because they have those too there. And they don't put up with intruders at the Vatican. This is why they have thick walls, and it goes back centuries. Why is there such a hypocrisy when it comes to border security? Good for thee, but not for me.
Well, it's if you look at the context of who the Vatican has allied itself with, really since the 60s, let's be honest with ourselves, if not earlier, but in the last decade or so, it's gotten really noticeable. The secular NGOs, NGO leaders, big money investors and things, and how they've all been together, working together on immigration, and meaning open borders policies and bringing people in from other countries. Several years ago, Cardinal Robert Sarah wrote in a book that it was to invoke the Bible to justify open borders and mass migration was satanic. And he was saying that in the context of what was happening a decade ago in Europe. And the Vatican was embroiled in that as well. If people forget that Brexit, part of what caused Brexit in the first place was open borders. That what looks like is going to topple the French government at some point is open borders. What's causing the so-called far right, meaning a centrist American-style Republican Party in parts of Germany, to rise up for the first time, any kind of right-wing party in Germany for the first time since World War II, is open borders. And yet you have the Vatican continuously invoking sacred scripture, somehow calling Jesus a migrant for moving one part of the Roman Empire to the other to participate in a census.
Like no laws were broken in the process of traveling down to Alexandria, but I guess we're not.
That means this summer my family and I are migrating from here in Oklahoma to the Southwest American desert during the summer for a road trip, because that's what migration is now, right? That's what it is, because we're now just changing the definition of things for a policy program. And what is at the heart of the policy program? It's money. The United States has been the biggest giver of money to the Vatican. Put an asterisk next to that, because we don't know how much China has given to the Vatican after the deal that they made with Rome for the so-called patriotic church there. We don't know what the details are of that. We probably never will know unless we get some people keep saying they want a Trump-style pope. I don't even know what that would look like, honestly. But if we get somebody dedicated to exposing things that have been going on for several decades in Rome, you might get the details of that deal that was made. But beyond that, it's the United States, and then it sort of fluctuates. Germany's usually number 2, sometimes South Korea for some reason. I guess the Catholics there tend to be well-to-do and give generously, but
really,
it's usually European countries, Germany, right after the United States. Typically is how it goes. We give the most money, and that's not counting grant money. It's going to be the United States number 1, without question, for the grant money. Just if you see the USAID numbers, I go to the various chanceries of the United States and the various nonprofits. If you understand that a Catholic nonprofit has to give a small portion of what they give to the Chancery office, who has to give a tiny portion of what they get from any source to the Vatican, you start seeing how this money works. And we're talking about billions upon billions of dollars. USAID was just the tip of the iceberg. A lot of these migrant programs are housed in the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Homeland Security, some of them in the Pentagon. So when you see this, these further audits that are coming. This is why you have the Democratic Party and the Democratic Party in LACE, meaning the American bishops, are all just foaming at the mouth at this stuff. They barely said anything about Nancy Pelosi receiving communion illicitly. They barely ever said anything about Joe Biden promoting abortion and transgenderism and all the rest of that stuff. They kept their mouths shut on that. But here, where the catechism is clearly on the side of J.D. Vance and on Donald Trump, they come down like the wrath of God. Now, why is that? The only explanation is it's money, because
and politics.
The laity don't give money anymore to the church. You may have noticed sometimes when the bishop's annual appeal comes around, your priest tends to mention it in the homily, and he talks about how you should really give to this, and the laity don't give as much money as we used to, and that's after 2 decades of predator priest scandals and all the rest of it. We don't give money as much as we used to. A lot of people give money to support the work of the church to tiny local nonprofit organizations that they know can be trusted to actually feed the poor, or crisis pregnancy centers, or they donate to a seminarian to help them pay their student loans off before they enter seminary, or whatever it is. They do those things, but they don't give their dioceses and their parishes as much anymore. And that's because of the Francis effect, as well as the McCarrick effect. When you have both of those things going on, so they have to get the money from somewhere. I think the timing of, when you look at the USAID numbers from the actual databases, and you see that the money exploded in 2021 when Joe Biden came in, which also happens to be when the bishops took our sacraments away from us, which also happens to have been in the aftermath of McCarrick. All of those things make sense. That's how you got to this place. And now they're reaping the whirlwind for what they've done.
Yeah. If you give billions of dollars to the Vatican, it's basically to ensure that they're going to turn a blind eye to your abortion policy, your, pro-homosexual marriage policy, your in vitro fertilization policy, and all the other policies that
exporting those to the developing world.
Yeah.
Which makes it 10 times worse.
Yeah. Forbes, which I'll link to today, says that the number 2 biggest receiver of USAID funds was CRS, Catholic Relief Services. So your little box that you get to put pennies in every Lent, well, these people receive $30 billion. Let that sink in. With the B. With the B. Okay. If I had 1% of that, we would crush the world with goodness. But we don't get a penny of those things. It's like, it kills me. I was lamenting over the weekend, like 6,500 journalists around the world, 30 countries received money from USAID. We didn't receive a single dime. It's like, oh, man, imagine what we would have done with that money. Like, why don't they give it to the good guys instead of the bad guys?
If you want federal funds, I have a way you can get federal funds.
Do you?
You need to start a weekly segment called The Catholic Argument for Sodomy, and then do a dead serious right out of James Martin's book, and you'll get federal funding. They'll love
and then all of a
so
sudden,
much.
poof, all the money you could ever handle. See, it comes with strings attached, and it's that temptation, right, to the world, the flesh, and the devil. And this is what gets me, because there's just, you got to make choices, right? Like, you got to choose whose team you're on. And it feels like too many in the hierarchy, something you and I've talked about many times, too many in the hierarchy, if they're being honest, they just want what this world has to offer. They're not really aiming for the next, are they?
You could be forgiven for thinking that. The homilies that they and their priests give that are usually, what's the joke about a homily? It's dad joke plus 1,000-foot level happy-go-lucky version of the scripture you just heard. Plus, on top of the fact, there's the lectionary issue also, right? How many times have you ever heard of that? People talk about, well, if you actually look at the lectionary, the readings in there tend to be the easy ones, the kind of challenging, the most challenging ones for us in the modern world that brush up against our modern sensitivities aren't included in your lectionary, which is why it's actually a lie that in the ordinary form of the Mass, you get more scripture reading than in the traditional Mass. It's not true. You don't. You get a 3-year schedule, but you're not going to remember it because you don't hear those readings very often. So you should read the Bible on your own time and get all those wonderful, wonderful indulgences that come with reading the Bible for 15 minutes a day. You get those. under the normal conditions. But you combine this sort of nice guy version of Catholicism they've been pushing down our throats or combine that with the bishops who don't challenge the powers that be until mysteriously the charitable funds that they were getting dry up, get cut off, and all of a sudden they're getting implicated, at least by proxy, not necessarily directly, in human trafficking. Again, when we're talking about children who are missing and the likely fate that at least some of those kids have, on top of the elephant in the room for the last quarter century, really the last half century, let's be honest, Catholics, people watching this, cradle Catholics watching this who are older, will know that in the 80s you heard stories about predator priests. I, who was not a Catholic in the 1990s when I was in high school, rock bands I listened to sang about predator priests. Everybody knew, even in the 90s, this was going on. But it was in the early 2000s that it got blown up into the media for political reasons, as some have pointed out. That looms large over all of this. It's a really ugly look that they're facilitating this stuff with that legacy hanging over us.
You know, if this much money is at stake, people have killed for far less. So if there's this much money at stake, I think it's going to be a fight to the death, in my opinion. I want to get your take on that. Like, in other words, you can imagine what the next election is going to be like. It's going to be a bloodbath. It's going to be an all-out war because they're fighting for the purse strings. They're fighting for power. They're fighting for power and control. And then how does that affect the Vatican moving forward? Because if they just lost their $30 billion cash cow, where are they going to find that money next? Especially if Americans aren't giving in the basket nearly as much, and they're not. More on that coming up after the break. Don't go anywhere. Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain. Praise be to God. Good to be on with you. Don't forget, tonight is the very last session of our Bible study on salvation history. Session 13. It's the end of the road. If you want to hang out with us tonight, you can do that. 7:30 Eastern on a Zoom chat. If you want the link to get access, you got to be on the email list. You got to be a part of the insider crew. Go to thestationofthecross.com/ACT and just hit that email sign up, giving me permission to harass your inbox at least once, maybe more a week. Praise be to God. But in exchange, I'm going to give you a tremendous amount of value. I promise. You're not going to lose. You're going to win. Go to thestationofthecross.com/ACT. Get signed up. You'll get that email later today. I wanted to point out that I had Tara Rodas on the show, I guess about 5 months ago now, and she was a whistleblower. She testified to Congress about the tens of thousands of children who went missing as a result of this horrible border policy and immigration policy under the Biden administration that is now trying to be corrected. People like Tom Homan, Catholic, who are trying to correct it despite the pushback of His Holiness Pope Francis in his recent letter to say, hey, it's not right, it's not right. Well, listen, tens of thousands. And I look at this video, and hardly anybody watched this video. It's not a fun topic. Nobody wants to hear about thousands and thousands of children being molested and hauled off into human sex slave trade. But it's a reality, and it's happening under our watch. And people like Tara Rodas are brave enough to say so. We must put an end to it. And we must not just sit here and pretend as though false charity is true charity. It is not. Dr. Anthony Stein is on the team today from Return to Tradition. Dr. Stein, welcome back. It seemed to me that under Pope Francis's pontificate, there was an increasing trend of fewer and fewer donated dollars from American Catholics going into the basket, especially in light of some of the scandals, CCHD, for instance. If I recall correctly, more and more Catholics were kind of getting fed up with the scandals, and they just stopped putting so much money in that basket. If the USAID cash cow gravy train is over, at least for this next 4 years, where do they get their money? How do they operate?
That's the $64,000 question. Where are they going to get their money from? Because the Germans can't make up most of it. I mean, have you seen the attrition rates in the church in Germany?
Right.
Because of the German church tax system there, where your tithe is given to the government and then given to the churches, and you have to register as a Catholic with the government, which you think with their history, they might be a little askant, that viewed such things with a little suspicion, but hey, whatever. But they lose 250,000 Catholics a year or more. They just apostatize. It's really the best numbers on how bad this situation is in the West. So that number is going to have to, by default, shrink as they get fewer and fewer Catholics, as the heretical bishops in Germany drive more and more people out of the church. You have to wonder where they're going to get the money from. Now, we know they're already suffering. I mean, before they tried to cancel Cardinal Burke by taking away his pension or whatever it was, that would, the money he gets as a cardinal for keeping an office. They called it an apartment, but it's an office where he sleeps in the back room every night, right? He used that money to cover the costs of that to pay his professional staff. They tried to take that away from him, and they preempted that by warning all the cardinals that they were going to be having to pay out of their own pocket for their rent in Rome. And the only one they tried to do that with was Cardinal Burke. But the threat itself kind of does point to something, that they are financially in the squeeze in Rome these days. And we know this about other things too. They've mentioned the need to do better fundraising and to tighten their belts and all sorts of things. We know that fewer people are visiting Rome, the Vatican in general, as tourists, that the lines aren't as long as they used to be. How many pictures have we seen of the Holy Father giving an Angelus address, and to a mostly empty piazza? How many times have we seen those pictures? There is a cascading effect, and it's not just the United States. They're going to have to come up with money, and this is why some people speculate, and I use the word speculate here to emphasize that the Chinese gave a few $1 billion to the Vatican for the deal for to basically sell out the underground church. You don't know about all that. For anybody not familiar with that, it's an insane diabolical deal they made. Nobody can figure out why they did it, but essentially the Chinese Communist Party gets to choose bishops, put them in power themselves. Maybe they'll let somebody from Rome come and consecrate them, and their parishes have pictures of dear leader instead of like Jesus in them. I mean, it's just weird stuff. Right. People debate about whether certain masses are valid or not. The masses in China are probably not valid unless you're going to an underground mass. And the Catholics in China going to underground masses face real persecution at the hands of the Chinese Communist Party. And yet Cardinal Zen got famous for resisting this, to the point where he actually went to jail for a while.
You remember how he snuck out? Talk about refugee status, immigrant status. Remember how he snuck out of Hong Kong to come to the Vatican in hopes of getting an audience with His Holiness, and sat in St. Peter's Square hoping and praying he would get an audience, and never got one as a refugee. And he had to go back to his country facing prison, as a consequence to his actions. And His Holiness didn't have time to visit with Cardinal Zen. I mean, that's the most insane, hypocritical thing I've ever heard. He's got time for Biden. He's got time for Pelosi. He's got time for all kinds of people. And he's the Pope. He should. But not Cardinal Zen seems crazy to me.
Mm-hmm. It's all a bigger picture as to why they are so obsessed with money. For the U.S. bishops, if the typical Catholic isn't giving much money anymore, and even if we were giving money, are we competing with, $5.2 billion since 2009? Are we, in terms of the tithes that we would be giving? Are we competing with the $2.9 billion since 2021, which is what that's from USAID through Catholic Charities. Are we able to compete on that scale? The answer is no. This is why Cardinal Dolan, who just retired, stepped out and said, it was such a evil thing people are saying that we only do this for money. We aren't making any money on this. I'm like, you might not be making a profit off of this, but there is the way it works with the sort of the diocesan taxes on things. This is not exactly an insignificant line item on your budget either. You're in Operation Survival mode. You don't realize it because you think you can just keep this revolution in the church going, this lukewarm liberalization of the church going, until people finally stop fighting back and decide they're going to keep going to mass for some reason that you can't quite enumerate, because they forced cultural change on the church, not just liturgical change. They forced cultural change on the church. And they did that over the past few decades, and people stopped going. Remember that cell tracking data? I've brought this up with you before. There were some groups who were doing what's called geofencing, where they can take an area and they can start looking at the number of cell phones at a location. And they can start doing that over the course of time and see how many people are going. And they started figuring out that only something like 5% of Catholics in the United States go to mass every Sunday. We can increase that by a percentage or two, because not everybody, a lot of Catholics don't bring their cell phones into their parish. But even if you leave it in your car, it'll show up on the property. It's worse than we think. Did you see that? I don't know if you used this on your show or not, but there was that footage from right after the Super Bowl. There was Philadelphia. There was a mass being said, and there was the priest and the altar servers were processing out, and his deacon, pretty sure it was his deacon, was wearing his clericals. And
it had, with like, that number on it?
Logo on it. Yeah.
Right.
Did you notice that parish was mostly empty? There was almost nobody there.
No, I didn't.
There was like 2 people per pew.
It's bizarre. Yeah. We live in bizarre times. They don't preach the gospel. They don't enforce the commandments. They enforce their liberal agenda, their modernist liberal agenda. And I would love to say that Catholics are just kind of getting fed up with the politicized, agendized gospel that gets fed down our throats. You know, the materialism, the consumerism, the secularism of wearing that jersey, alb at Mass. It's like, this cheapens the gospel. Our Lord died on a cross to save souls, and you're just like, go Eagles. And I'm glad the Eagles beat the Chiefs. Don't get me wrong. Praise be to God. I think it was a good lesson for Taylor Swift to learn that. Good humility for her. Praise be to Jesus. But I felt bad that poor Harrison Butker had to learn it the hard way. But nonetheless, that music means we're out of time. Dr. Anthony Stein, if you can hang out with us, we'd like to continue our conversation in the after show. I'm going to put links to everything we discussed today in the show notes. But let me just one last reminder. Vatican is a walled city with thick, high walls. And no, you're not allowed to illegally immigrate there. No, you're not allowed to cross their borders without being invited and having permission. It doesn't work that way. And no, they don't take any illegal immigrants from any third world country who are suffering in any way, shape, or form. Let us pray for common sense and the gospel of Jesus.
Catholic radio has just been a lifesaver for me. I still listen to it every day. I start my day with it. I listen to it all day long as much as I can. I am very grateful for it.
It's just an amazing thing to have, as I am new to Catholicism. Obviously, it's not only helping me, but it's helping so many other people on their walk.
Thank you. God bless you for iCatholic Radio. It has changed my life.
Donate today at thestationofthecross.com.
And we're back. Welcome to the Aftershow, everyone. I'm very disappointed that no one
good morning.
No one commented on my brilliant deduction about this whole prisoner release thing from Russia.
What was your brilliant deduction?
Well, the guy's name is Fogel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fogel. That's foe, which means enemy, and GEL, as in like gelatin, which comes from pigs, and we all know Legion was put into the swine. So Trump just imported the Antichrist from Russia. Like, I don't know how no one's seeing this, but come on, our days are numbered. Trump just imported the Antichrist from Russia.
Wasn't that guy a Protestant minister?
What's that?
Probably.
Wasn't he? Yeah, that's what I thought. He was a Protestant minister.
I think so. Yeah.
By the way, the thought that I had also about all this, as you were closing out, saying they don't take any immigrants there themselves. Remember World War II that Pius XII had a bunch of Jews and
right.
City?
Yes. Exactly. I watched the documentary film starring what's his name.
Personal risk to himself and the church, by the way, to do that.
Right. Yes. Exactly. And he asked every institution across the city of Rome to do the same. So they were all doing it. They went so far as to be willing to lie on official Vatican documents to try to save these people's lives. They committed the sin of lying, forging documents, baptismal records, etc., to save as many people as possible. And there was like 5,000 Jews didn't end up going off to the chambers because of the efforts of Pius XII and all those that supported his cause during World War II. And yet he's the bad pope. He's the Hitler pope, right?
He's Hitler's pope by hiding Jews. And then the 500,000 he got that he helped with an underground railroad get to Morocco out of Europe. I mean,
yeah. Well, there were definitely people in the hierarchy that were happy to help Nazis escape. There's no question about that, too. But not everybody, as we know, not everybody in the hierarchy is trustworthy. So let me give some shout outs here. Paul, our friend from Buffalo. Damon, good morning to you. Janice, good morning. Praise be to God. I am glad to see that the computer did show up, and by the grace of God, we're able to use it today. I almost wasn't able to use the new computer today because they didn't send the right cables. I had to go buy some. But it all came together. Mary and Robert, you are amazing. Thank you for your generous, incredible support to help me get that new computer. You're awesome. Jen Nugent, good morning. Trad Jack Burton, Tweed and Toe. Praise be to God. Eileen, good morning. James 16897 from sunny Romania. Mary Gibson, good morning. Praise be to God. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Don the Highlander, I see you there. Mary's here. White Wolf. Frank Rangel, Michael, good morning. Praying for Francis's health. Yeah, his health is not looking good. But, we've tried to say in the past, I mean, how many times have we like, well, he can any day now, he's the Energizer Bunny. He just keeps going. You never know.
Yeah,
Pray
I make no predictions about when he's going to pass away. I make none. I don't think that's even a prudent thing to do. He has the access to the medical resources necessary to keep him around for a long time.
Yeah.
And John Paul II looked at him like he was in much worse shape for a long time. So you never know. Then again, tomorrow, who knows?
You never know. But pray for him. We need to be praying for him. He could, you never know when the master of the house will return at a time you do not expect. So we need to be pray, fasting, and doing penance for him because he plays with fire, in my humble opinion. Christine, good morning to you. Restore Justice, good morning. Alberto, Miriam, Colleen, good morning. Deborah, Angelo, a Peacemaker 69 says, great show today. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Lynn Pine, Robert DeBruce, Sci-Fi, Patty, Elizabeth Ramirez, Junior Barra, Mimi, Daniel Hyatt. Welcome to the team. Thanks for hanging out with us. More time to repent. Patty said, wasn't that Pope declared righteous among nations by the new nation of Israel? Yeah, actually, there was some praise for Pius XII just right after the war, but then they changed the narrative not long after. Like I said, I keep the Rabbi of Rome's biography on my bookshelf back there. Why he converted to the Catholic faith and took the name Eugenio as an honor to Pope Pius XII. He's clear to say he didn't convert because of Pius XII, but he converted because he felt it was the truth that Jesus was in fact the Messiah, which is why he converted. But he wanted to honor the work of Pius XII to save Jews during the war, which he was the chief rabbi of Rome at the time, by taking the name Eugenio Zoli. You can get a copy of it on Amazon. You can read it for yourself. It's great. Catholic Cat, morning to you. Praise be to God. Silent Fire, good morning. Thanks for being on the team today. Hey, I got a bunch of people watching on X. If you're on X, comment. Let us know where you're from. Let us know you're part of the team today. Let us know what you think, one way or the other. I'd love to get your opinion.
I gotta start figuring out how to do a live stream on X and on YouTube.
Well,
I tried to do it on Rumble, but Rumble requires you to do like some satanic ritual or something to make it work.
It is annoying, isn't it? It's like a Rumble.
It is.
Rumble could have been a contender, but they're not. They're like, they've never put, either they don't have the funds or they don't have the interest to really update their infrastructure to make it more user friendly for creators to get the most out of it. It's just like, unless you're on the Dan Bongino team, there's no rhyme or reason. Gwensis 61 nailed it. Says X won't let you comment unless you have premium. Oh,
yeah,
that's why
I haven't been able to figure
there.
out how to change that setting. I've been looking. I even asked Mr. Grok, and he gave me no advice whatsoever. So he was not helpful
By the
at all.
way, I think tomorrow I'm going to be live streaming involving this very spicy article published in First Things this morning. The headline for the article is Pope Francis's Apocalyptic Dream. And they ask the question, is Pope Francis an accelerationist? If you don't know what accelerationist is, that is somebody
did you say First Things?
Yeah, that's First Things.
You didn't say Crisis Magazine. You didn't say 1 Peter 5. First Things. Said. Did George Weigel write that?
I mean, like a moderate, like centrist right, meaning kind of left wing, ostensibly. Yeah,
Nova Sordo going, like Marty Hagen singing.
Is Pope Francis an accelerationist? What they ask, and if you don't know what an accelerationist is, it's a philosophical position that says everything is heading towards collapse. Civilization is going to collapse, and we'll come out on the other side, hopefully better. But collapse is inevitable, so let's vote in ways that make it so collapse comes faster. Usually it's a hard right-wing position.
That sounds very evangelical, doesn't it?
It sort of does. These are the people who...
That's the evangelical position.
They think a military dictator is going to come around, right? And then they'll be on the side of the military dictator, assuming that he's a military dictator in the cut of, say, Tom Homan, as opposed to a military dictator in the cut of, say, General Milley. Can you imagine that?
Right. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, build back better, says Mac. Chris Shoemaker, good morning to you, says, love listening to Anthony Stein, Joe McClain, and team. Praise be to God. Candlesticks, good morning. It is very Protestant, isn't it? The evangelicals that want to build the third temple. Why? Because they want to bring about the second coming of Christ, despite how many souls will end up in hell forever as a result. I mean,
they think they can force Jesus to come back. They think in such legalistic terms that they can create the conditions. Be like, Jesus be like, dang it, I have to go down there now. I don't have the will to say no.
Right. Because when Julian the Apostate tried to have the temple built, how did that work out? He was the emperor. He could do whatever he wanted, and it didn't work out for him. So why would it work out for you evangelicals? Just asking for a friend. I don't know.
Yeah.
Man, you know what? You mentioned something in there on the radio side about like the Bible and about the Novus Ordo Missae readings. And one thing that has really annoyed me about the Missal of the Novus Ordo is they will often, like you were saying, they try to avoid really challenging things. And there'll be a passage. There'll be a passage that they will have, and they will obviously cut it short by a verse. You know what I mean? And like, if you read just one more verse, you get the meat, you get the teeth, and they cut it out. And I'm like,
that'll make you squirm in your seat a little bit.
Right. So a lot of times when I'm reading the gospel from the Novus Ordo Missae, and there's a reason why I do it, because the vast majority of my radio audience goes to the Novus Ordo in the suburban Catholic churches. So I want them to hear the gospel and the commentary in a way that they're never going to hear at the church. But oftentimes I will add that extra verse just because they need to hear that. Good. They need to hear that greater context. It's so annoying
because people need to hear that. That's why I sometimes put up the papal encyclicals and things that I put up that get very uncomfortable at times.
Right.
You know, I'm working on my channel right now through Mediator Dei, and that thing gets very uncomfortable. Pius XII says essentially, yeah, the Pope can make changes to the Mass, but he can't just make unilateral changes to the Mass. They have to be in continuity with everything that came beforehand. When you read Mediator Dei, it seems to say that.
Stein, stop. All you need is a napkin at a coffee bar, and you're good. That's all you need to change the Mass.
You scribble it down. You forgot about the Committee of Protestant Ministers led by a probable Freemason. Then you're good to go.
You're good to go.
Maybe my favorite part of that anecdote, Joe, is that's the same guy. I believe that was Louis Boyer who took part in writing. No, Louis Boyer was one of the scribblers on the napkin. Because they were up against the deadline. And he saved the Sanctus. Bonini wanted to remove the Sanctus, and Boyer made him keep it in. And Boyer was the one who called the people in charge of the reforming the calendar with the saints and all those things, all the feast days. He called the people in charge of that a trio of maniacs. Like really? Boyer was no conservative or trad, but he was the one. He saved the Sanctus from Bonini, and he called the calendar reformers a trio of maniacs. Yeah, he had harsh criticisms for how the quote unquote reforms were done.
There's a mountain of problems with the new liturgical calendar, and first among them, I think, is the near total removal of fasting days from it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. You fast on Good Friday and Easter or on Ash Wednesday, and then you might be reminded that it might be a good idea to consider doing that on Christmas Eve. And that's it. Like, the church still requires you to do it on Friday or come up with a suitable substitute. I don't know what that is, but a suitable substitute. But fasting is gone. And the Easter, I heard this from somebody yesterday, that in the East, they just make fun of us for having abandoned fasting altogether. They say that the Catholics don't fast anymore. That is what the Eastern Orthodox think of us now. So whenever you hear somebody say, "Oh, we're on the verge of reuniting with Rome," no, we're not. Oh, by the way, I don't know if you heard this story. This is one of those things that got lost in the Catholic Charity story and then the USAID story. Francis comes out and says, hey, we are on the verge of coming with a common date to celebrate Easter. Okay?
Yeah, I
common
covered
date,
this. Yeah.
Sunday to celebrate Easter every year. Do you know what that'll do to the traditional Latin Mass? It will annihilate it because we can't just monkey around with our liturgy that way. It's going to have a catastrophic effect.
And it sounded to me Francis was trying to indicate that he's willing to go east on that one. Yeah.
The East should stop using the Julian calendar. Why are a bunch of people who were never subject to the Roman Empire using the Julian calendar? I do not understand this. Yeah, some of them were part of the Byzantine Roman Empire, whatever. But why are the Russians using the Julian calendar? It's because they don't want to be Rome. They don't want to be Catholic. If you've paid attention to some of the things Putin has said during the Ukraine war, it's because a lot of it has to do with animosity to Catholics.
Right.
We're not getting anywhere near reuniting, guys. It's not happening. Short of literally if the certain readings of the purported Fatima messages that are out there involving Russian tanks rolling into Western Europe, and then them stopping because the Pope does the consecration, gets a handful of bishops who will listen to him to actually do it properly, and then there's some miraculous happening involving the Virgin Mary, converting the entire country of Russia to Catholicism, not to Eastern Orthodoxy, to Catholicism. Yeah. Short of that happening, I don't think it's reuniting with them.
I don't see it either. I did interview a traditional Roman Catholic who lives in Moscow or lives in Russia. Does he live in Moscow? He might live outside of Moscow with his wife and 6 kids. They moved there. And I was asking, like,
does he have an easy time getting to Mass?
Well, he does. He says, which is fascinating because I asked him all these questions. Unfortunately, my computer that I was using was like acting up and my video quality was terrible. So I didn't actually publish that video after doing the live show. It's still available on the live show, but I didn't publish it as its own content because my quality video was horrible. His was great. I've got to get him back on. It was fascinating because we talked about what was life like for Catholics in particular. Is there any animosity towards Catholics? Because Vladimir Putin's not dumb. He's smart. He's like, I'm going to go and talk to, I'm going to recruit. If I'm going to have immigrants, I want the right kind. I want my kind to come. So he's gone to the whole world and said, I'm going to make it as easy as possible. If you're a traditional, family-focused, conservative, person and family to come to my country, I'm going to give you all the tools you need to move here, get acclimated, blah, 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 blah. So we were talking about that. And I'm like, well, what about being a trad Catholic? He's got like 3 options, I think he said. Jake, do you remember how many options he said he had in Moscow? I want to say he had at least 2 options he could go to Mass there. And I'm like,
something
well,
like that, yeah.
Yeah. And then he said, I'm like, well, did the Orthodox mistreat you? Nope. He goes, everybody's totally cool with it. Everybody's fine. And, and I think part of the problem is because Russians identify as Russian Orthodox, but they don't really go to Mass. They don't, or their divine liturgy. They don't really go to their divine liturgies all that frequently. They're more culturally Orthodox than they are actual practicing Orthodox there.
And this is why I object whenever people say, oh, the consecrations of Russia worked because they all became Eastern Orthodox again. I'm like, in that same way, that guy down the road who goes to Mass on Ash Wednesday, Easter, and Christmas is a Catholic. Okay? That's what they did.
Yeah.
They became kind of lukewarm.
Yeah.
That's not conversion.
They're still leading the world in alcoholism too. Their abortion rates have dropped significantly since the Soviet Union. That's good because they were leading the world 10-1 in abortions in the Soviet Union. So that's dropped significantly, and that's a good sign. Praise be to God.
They still export some of the most depraved pornography anybody's ever heard of there.
Yeah.
Right,
they still have lots of issues, but I do find it very fascinating that he is able to raise his family there, and he does say that society in general doesn't tolerate the LGBTQ agenda, the Rainbow Coalition. They don't tolerate that in public. That's not something they deal with, but I'm sure they have their struggles. But I don't know. It's very fascinating to hear what he says there. I'm not anxious to move to Russia, but nonetheless, I found it fascinating. But I don't think there was any real movement for true unification between East and West. I mean, first of all, the patriarch of the Russian Orthodox doesn't really much care what happens with the guy in Constantinople. Istanbul. You know, like he doesn't worry about what the guy in Turkey who's surrounded by Muslims, not Orthodox Catholics, has to say about unification with Rome. He's not going to make his decision based on that at all. So, and then of course the Ukrainians that elected Vigano to be Pope, 4 years ago, like I don't think they care much either. So it's a pretty splintered group, to say the least. There's not going to be unification anytime soon. Try to Schmom. Good morning. Thanks for hanging out. I know someone who is Russian Orthodox, and they said that the date they celebrate Christmas is decided by parish. So this year they celebrated on December the 25th. Every single parish gets to decide when it celebrates Christmas.
Yeah, that makes as much sense as what I found out about Canada recently. I don't know if you've been paying attention to the debates in Canada.
Just stop there. You can just stop there.
Canadians are all like,
when I found out about Canada,
the American right now because of Trump's rhetoric. I found out that they have tariffs between their provinces in Canada. That's not a country. That's not a country. I'm sorry if you're listening in Canada. That's not a country when your provinces have to have tariffs between them. Maybe instead of worrying about America annexing you, which is not going to happen, short of your government being idiotic and allowing the Chinese military to put a base there, if that happens, the United States will invade you. And your government will be there at 100% at fault for that. But short of that, you really don't have anything to worry about, I don't think. But it's madness. It absolutely is. And the idea that the individual parish could determine when Christmas is. I mean, I don't want to hear any Russian Orthodox types who go, ooh, in my comments, go Orthodox because of this. You should go join us, the Orthodox. I've always banned them without question. It was a one and done kind of thing.
Wow.
Oh, no, I do not put up with that. If you are Orthodox, you could feel free to comment on things, but telling people to join the Orthodox Church, to leave the Catholic Church, no, you're done. Gone. I don't put up with that.
Bye. Oh, man.
Same with Protestant. Same with Protestants.
Pat, the Banhammer, Jake the Banhammer does sometimes ban Catholics, Protestants.
I usually only ban nastiness, regardless of source.
I try to be very judicious about it.
Yeah.
I think the first person I banned was a guy who calls himself Jean Ricafort, who came into my comments saying, Pope Francis is a luminous pope sent by God to update the teachings of the church. He was a luminous.
Like,
yikes.
We don't need this nonsense.
Yikes. Hey, Patty Tada, welcome and good morning. Says, for real Catholics, there is not a point of discussion. Go JD. These are guys just looking to make a living in gibberish, nothing related to following Jesus Christ. I don't fully understand what you mean by that. So maybe you could clarify that.
I think he's supporting J.D. Vance against the statements of the bishops. That's my impression there.
Great. Yeah, we do too. But not all bishops are equal.
Yeah.
Some bishops, as I point, and I didn't, there's a reason why this, on the radio side of our show today, I didn't read the Bishop Strickland statement because we know he's on the team. We know he's awesome, which is why I'm going to go to Greece and Turkey with him come May. But I read Kansas City Archbishop Naumann because he's a sleeper in that regard. He's not somebody who's known for rocking the boat or for saying things that can ruffle feathers. He is. You would think he was a team player. I remember it was his statement on the SSPX chapel that got built in St. Mary's, Kansas. That was very revealing in the SSPX debate. He was like, yeah, of course they're in communion. I don't want you to go to mass there, but they've got valid sacraments. Remember that? I mean, and he's coming out and saying, of course you have to have reasonable immigration policies. And I guess that's my point is you don't have to go to Vigano. You don't have to go to Strickland to find the counter to this. There are some that are more in that go along to get along kind of category that are also beginning to speak out because I think more and more bishops are feeling the pressure of crap. If I don't say truth in the midst of error, I'm going to be held accountable for this. And I feel like, he's probably in that category. And I bet there's others they don't have the courage to stand up and say these things, but I feel like they're feeling the pressure that they better do something, say something soon. And I hope and pray for their courage. I hope that they do stand up because they need to. Anyway, my 2 cents.
Jake, I'm sending you an email. I'm sending an email to you with a link to something on X.
Okay.
Somebody tagged me in this saying it sounds like a Novus Ordo prayer of the faithful. This is a protest that's going on in Rome, or not Rome, in Washington, or it was yesterday, and it's so cringy that we all need to laugh. So I just sent a link to you. So feel free to take a look at that.
Yeah, let me see here.
By the way, Flyer Dude said Bishop Naumann also failed, though, to make the public sign of the cross while leading the prayer for the March of Life. Yes, he did. Who was it? Oh, it was your good buddy out of New York City, who also didn't make the sign of the cross at the inauguration.
Dolan.
Good grief. He's 75. Yeah, so who do you think we're going to get to replace Dolan?
I don't want to think about it. I have my money on Bishop Barron getting a promotion of some kind soon, but I don't know if that's
in New York City. I can't see it.
No, I don't know if it's going to be in New York, although they kept trying to sell him as a new Fulton Sheen a few years ago, if you remember that. So it wouldn't surprise me if that happened. And he would actually be a weird fit there. But going from running a tiny little diocese in the heartland to New York City is a bit of a jump.
Did you send this to me, Jake?
Yeah, I forwarded it to you because it'll probably be easier for you to just throw it up there than for me to transfer it over 15 screens to
I'll put it on my screen.
This is posted by Libs of TikTok. This is why you join us for the after show, folks.
This is why what we're able to get away with.
Oh, which side are you on? Which side are you on? Tell me which side are you on?
Why?
Which side are you on?
This is in defense of USAID.
We'll fight against Doge. Did you just say that? You wrote that as a lyric? Like, oh man.
We need to put
Joe, you were saying the next election is going to be a bloodbath. Well, but also this is what we're up against, okay?
We need to put an immediate halt to theater kids until we figure out what's going on.
All right, let's listen to this some more. This is why I don't sing in church, because I have charity for my neighbor and their eardrums.
Our walls will fight from dawn to dusk. Oh, which side are you on? Which side are you on?
This is the entrance hymn at the local suburban parish. I'm pretty sure of it.
Tell me, which side are you on? Which side are you on? Trump's coming for our unions. He wants us.
Wait, hold on. Didn't the union support Donald Trump in the election? I think there was a lot of unions that came out for him.
Yeah,
no?
Exactly.
That's so great. Oh,
well, when they say
man.
our unions, they mean the actual public employee unions, which are a totally different beast. An actual labor union.
He wants us to bow to him, but we want him in jail.
Of course you do.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Tell me, which side are you on? Which side are you on? They say in the capital city there are no neutrals found. You're either with the union or a scabby Musk bloodhound.
Why do you insult bloodhounds? What did bloodhounds do to you? Bloodhounds are great dogs. Have you not seen the documentary film Dukes of Hazzard? There's a fantastic bloodhound on that show. You ought to watch it. Good grief. Don't be insulting bloodhounds.
Oh, which side are you on? Which side are you on? Tell me, which side are you on? Which side are you on? Don't take that government buyout. Don't listen to Trump's lies. Us workers haven't got a chance unless we organize. Oh.
So you can't have a lot. You know, it's interesting. It kind of on a tangent there. When I was in the Marine Corps, there's this feeling, there's this sense that they let you sort of think that you can't make it on the outside. You can't make it as a civilian. You have to have the government there to give you a paycheck. And so there's this fear amongst a lot of service members that are getting ready to transition back to civilian life. That what am I going to do? How am I going to make it? How will I eat? You know, because I just can't make it unless I get a guaranteed government paycheck twice a month. And just listening to that kind of reminded me of it. It's like, I'm sorry, being a federal employee isn't the end all be all of all things. But too many in the federal government are obviously just, sucking at the teat and just enjoying all the benefits, but not giving the American people who pay your salary their honest day's wage. I mean, it's just, what would be wrong with reducing the size of the government? Where is the common sense error there? I just don't see it. It's crazy. We live in crazy times, man.
Won't someone please think of the federal employees? All the people who do jobs that are technically useless for the most part. It's occurred to me that Elon Musk being the guy doing this is appropriate because he cut down 80% of the employees of Twitter. And it only took a couple of weeks for Twitter to get back to running perfectly fine, if not better than before. So again, how much dead weight is there in the federal workforce? 2 million employees. Is there a reason to have 2 million employees? Not counting military personnel. I don't think there is.
No.
I mean, the perfect example of where our government is, they can only handle 10,000 retirements a year because they manually store everyone's retirement paperwork in a cave because they want to have the records survive a nuclear war. So they put it under a mountain. These are folders. Elon Musk was tweeting about this last night. It's just amazing to think about this. That is where we are. Our government. That's where our government is right now. This, by the way, the modern civil service was largely invented by Woodrow Wilson. Largely, I mean, it kind of existed before that, but he was the one who gave us the modern version.
You gotta love Woodrow Wilson, man.
We are dealing with 100+ years of consequences of an outdated system for our government. It's time to get to the modern era with our government.
Less is more. Less is more. Hey, Edward Clancy, good morning to you. Says, my good friend, Father Michael Shields, ministered to the post-abortive community in Siberia for 28 years. The Russians in that area have led a great deal of white martyrdom. I bet. Also, our good friend David over at iCatholicMobile.com. Thank you for your generosity, David. You're amazing. He supports what we do here at the Station of the Cross. We really appreciate it. I love having my family on the iCatholic Mobile Network. I like it that my phone company believes that there's no salvation outside the Catholic Church. And they have that purity browser, too, which is fantastic to help protect your family. iCatholicMobile.com. God bless you, David. Thank you for that. Paul says, Dr. Stein, exactly. Public unions was a really bad idea. James says, what about the redundant Department of Redundancy? I see where you're going with that. What do you think, though, Dr. Stein, about Musk now, because of his position at Doge, has access to information that could give him a competitive advantage over other companies?
What private information could that possibly be? He runs Starlink and he ran PayPal. He has access to everybody, virtually everybody on the planet's private information. All the social media companies sell
all of the USAID, all of the Treasury information. He might be finding information about competitors in that regard that he might be able to use to his distinct advantage from a business perspective.
I am not worried about that. Not the slightest. I'm not. We're talking here about a federal government that was sending money overseas for transgender stuff to fund surgeries and propaganda in countries that don't want it. And I'm not that worried about him doing that. I would doubt that he's doing that simply because he has the money to buy any information he wants. He could bribe somebody for old-fashioned industrial espionage if he wanted to. Probably more efficient than going through government databases. I wonder sometimes if these government databases are going to look like, I hate to use a pop culture reference. Did you ever see Superman 3? That computer hacking scene where
like forever ago,
the computer hacking. Yeah. You remember what the computers look like there? A lot of the computer systems in the modern government are like a generation newer than that. And that's about it. A lot of them have not been updated since like the 90s.
Oh man. When I was in the Corps, we had like MS-DOS programs that we were working off of. And I remember seeing like the very first, we had like a computer game. It was like a helicopter game or something like that on the computer. And I used to work second shift, so I'd be all alone. And sometimes I'd play that game and I thought it was the coolest thing ever, man, back in the day. But everything was MS-DOS prompt. By the way, Tradish Mom wanted to clarify, the parishes get to choose either December the 25th, which is the correct date, or January 7th, which is not the correct date. But they get to choose one of those two dates. So it's not just they don't get to choose any old date. They get to it's one of the other. That makes a little more sense. But still, it's December the 25th. There's historical reasons to believe that that's the actual day. Tradish Mama says this is like the woman who sang at the DNC. Man, that's rough listening to that. But I mean, just be honest, it does sound like the interest hymn to a lot of parishes, does it not? I mean,
right. I mean, again, I'm worried about the next election, but I'm not going to worry about it for a while because it's a long ways off. And if the Democrats maintain a public approval rating in the 30s, they're going to suffer in the midterm elections. They will suffer badly. And if the Democrats put up Pete Buttigieg, or my hope is they put up AOC, because I want maximum entertainment value out of the next election.
Oh man,
as you know, Donald Trump will still be on the campaign trail. They'll go campaign for JD Vance or whoever the nominee is.
Did you see?
So you'll have him there.
Did you see Brett
I
Baer?
saw that. I everybody's interpreting that wrong. Trump did
Brett
not
Baer,
throw JD Vance,
who is a Catholic, by the way, Brett Baer, asked him, do you want to see, is JD Vance the next pick? And Donald Trump said no. And he said no immediately. He didn't hesitate. No. And then he went on to say, oh, he's doing a great job. He's done a fantastic job. But we'll have to see. So why do you think
I think everybody's
no?
interpreting because it's the year 2025, not 2027. That's why he said no. Because the election is for 3.5 years. And Brett Baer has a history of trying to hit Trump with gotchas and things that he can make headlines with. This is one of those sort of so Discord kind of questions. I've never liked Brett Baer when it comes to how he handles, Trump and the rest. They're gotchas. Vance is clearly being positioned to be the next. Whether he chooses to run with it or it can't be. Look, if he doesn't run for it, that usually means they think they're not going to win in 2028. But he's clearly being positioned for that. That's why he's out there saying all the public things. He's on a diplomatic mission right now that usually a president would do. He's out there campaigning to have
so sharp.
International regulations on the AI gotten rid of. So that's what he's doing.
I like watching JD Vance with his family. There's a video of him getting off the plane with his wife and kids, and the kids are in pajamas already because they're like, because life, right? It's like my wife and I going on a trip, and we might, prepare the kids for bedtime or whatever ahead of time. It's like, seems so normal, seems so regular, so relatable. Not like what we've seen in previous administrations where it's like elitist, whether it's the Biden administration or some other administration or whatever. Just it seems so much more down to earth. JD Vance is, for all of his faults, sharp as a tack, and reasonable. And I would love to see him run. I would love to see him run.
I've seen like moderate to even kind of liberal women say that they like JD Vance and would vote for him. So the nomination is his if he chooses to accept it, and if he chooses to pursue it, and if depending on who his competition is. And I look at the rest of the GOP field, and other than maybe Ron DeSantis, I don't know who could go up. But there was some breaking news just now.
Uh-oh.
Out of the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, Pope Francis announced today that he has accepted the resignation of Most Reverend Dennis M. Schnurr from pastoral governance in the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, and has appointed Most Reverend Robert G. Casey, Auxiliary Bishop of Chicago, as the 11th Archbishop of Cincinnati. Now, people will be like, well, some of these auxiliary bishops in Chicago are actually pretty good. I'm like, are you sure about that? These are being consecrated by Supich.
Yeah, Garcia Sierra down in San Antonio came out of Chicago. Look how that went.
I would like to know what this new Archbishop of Cincinnati has to say about immigration.
We're about to find out.
Notice I'm not talking about, the gay stuff. I'm not talking about anything about that. I'm talking immigration. That's what I want to know.
Yeah, it's going to be the big issue. Hey, by the way, Don Paddock says, how about all the unelected Joe Schmoes? Are you just calling me a Joe Schmo, Don? All the unelected Joe Schmoes that woke for the government that have access to the same information. Well, I don't disagree. I think a lot of people can misuse that information that they have access to for sure. But The question is, if Elon gets information that he can use to his distinct advantage from a business perspective, how do we feel about that? That was the question, but maybe it's a non-issue. I don't know. Don Franco wants to ask you a question, though. Says, Dr. Stein,
Sure.
Have you heard the interview by Bishop Daniel Dolan regarding Malachi Martin? The bishop is dead now, and the interview is on Restoration Radio on Apple Podcasts.
No, is it an anti-Malachi Martin?
I'm
just curious, because the reason I asked that is because there's a lot of the stuff out of the woodwork right now, because it's pretty well known that there's a book coming on Father Malachi Martin that's going to exonerate him of almost all the negative things people have said. And so I was not surprised to see a whole flurry of anti-Malachi Martin activities coming out. So
I guess this is an older interview of some kind.
Martin, I'm not interested. If it's an anti-Malachi Martin thing, I'm not interested.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never listened to it.
I have spoken with enough people who knew Malachi Martin in life to know that the things that people say about him are false, to the point of being actually calumnious. Now, calumny, I think, does take a little bit of intention. If you believe a lie that you are then repeating, you're not lying, you're just spreading misinformation. There's a difference, but I don't know.
Yeah, I've enjoyed my interviews with Rob Morrow Jr., a good friend of the show, about the life of and legacy of Father Malachi Martin. And I think I appreciate him more now than ever. And I would have to say I'm very much looking forward to the release of the book. And I know this because I've had these conversations with Rob. There's some pretty cool stories in that book that haven't really been told before. So I'm looking forward to that release. Coming up in October, it looks like it's going to be happening. So Caleb the Mechanic, Good morning to you. Praise be to God in all things. Thanks for hanging out. Says others are copying Elon to catch up. Well, we'll see. Diane Stroud, I'm a little nervous about the new Archbishop of Cincinnati. I'm in that diocese. Wow. Well, the good news is you know what you're getting. You're definitely not going to get a stalwart, hold the line, courageous Catholic bishop. You're going to get a go-along to get along team player. And at least you know what you're getting into. It's not going to be a mystery, right? And I'm sure he'll come out with some... Go ahead.
You're probably not getting McElroy 2.0 either. So, I mean...
You're going to get a team player.
Yeah. If I had to choose to live under the diocese of McElroy or Supich, I would choose McElroy because at least McElroy is really intelligent. At least you have that much going for you. Whereas sometimes I wonder with Cardinal.
He's retired. He's 75. So he'll be replaced soon. I mean, think about all these dioceses that now have to be replaced. You're going to get New York City and Chicago. Those are huge dioceses. Like what? Who's going to go in those spots? Like, is it going to be Tobin? Is Tobin going to get pushed up someplace? You know, he's on the team. He's one of the team. He's one of the team mechanics.
The question I have here is, what's the anybody want to take the bet that James Martin will finally be made auxiliary bishop somewhere?
Oh, don't say that.
He's the highest profile priest after Barron. Barron was promoted 10 years ago now.
Diocese of Manchester, Christine, did you just say the Diocese of Manchester? Is the bishop in New Hampshire turning 75? Don't say that. Please don't say that. Christine, you ruined my whole day. That guy, he's such a good guy. The bishop in Manchester, New Hampshire is such a great guy. Loves the tradition. He will say the TLM. He pitches in at the FSSP parish when Father wasn't available. The bishop would come and say mass for the faithful. Let that sink in. He was encouraging every parish to bring back altar rails and ad orientem. He restored the cathedral to its grandeur and beauty. It breaks my heart. You're kidding me. He's turning 75 either this year or next. Ugh. And I was even thinking maybe we should move back to New Hampshire. Maybe. Not now. Forget it. In Proximus, good morning. Remember that St. Ignatius said no ecclesiastical titles for his guys. Well, too late now, huh? That ship has sailed.
I just saw a tweet here. Sorry, a post. It's a post on X, not a tweet on Twitter anymore. Someone was saying, imagine being Catholic and the Pope writes a letter essentially calling you a terrible person that he sends to every bishop in the United States, because that's the life J.D. Vance is living right now. And someone quoted it and said,
Tom Homan.
Someone quoted it and said, every Catholic who goes to the Latin Mass has been living this life for years. We're used to it now. It doesn't bother us.
Yeah.
Welcome to the team.
Welcome to the team.
JD, you very much have you very much have the sort of the orientation to be a traditionalist. Come finish this journey.
Yeah, exactly.
You've already got the badge of being attacked by Francis.
Yeah.
So here's another one for you, Damian Thompson.
I've interviewed
kind
him.
of a moderate conservative, English Catholic, has a podcast where he talks about the crisis from kind of moderate conservative kind of angle.
Benign, I would say.
Here's what he's a very benign, and so keep the word benign as a descriptor in your mind for this man. As you hear what he said on X last night, he said, so predictable that Pope Francis would condemn the deportation of rapists and murderers from the U.S. while maintaining his deplorable silence on the genocide of the Uyghurs and the persecution of Chinese Christians that his pontificate has enabled.
Yeah.
That's worse
Yes.
that's worse than the things I say about him.
Oh,
so
I interviewed Damian Thompson years ago now. I've tried to get him back. He wouldn't come. But, he told me the story about how he spent a week living out of the Santa Marta Hotel, which is where the Pope lives. This was early in the pontificate. It was like the first half of the pontificate of Francis. And Damian he and I were chatting about this on the show. And I'm like, well, why does he live there? Is it because the papal apartment is too plush, it's too palatial it's too posh, it's too bourgeois? He goes, oh no, they spent huge dollars renovating Santa Marta so that he could have a sweet apartment there. He lives there because he can't stand not knowing or hearing what's going on. He says the Godfather. He wants to know. He wants to sit in the cafeteria and hear the conversations of all the guests that are around him. So he has his thumb on the pulse of whatever's going on. He wants to see who's coming and going. He doesn't want to be removed and sanitized and he sort of suggested like Benedict was, like JP2 was. And of course, the end of JP2's life, Cardinal Živich was the gatekeeper. And there are rumors that he was taking huge bribes to grant or deny access to JP2 from guests. So if that's not true, and I pray it's not, that's terrible. But there's a lot of people who say and claim that he was taking huge dollars to give an audience to JP2, and so Francis, as Damien said, was trying to avoid all that by living in Santa Marta, which then spent huge dollars to renovate the place so he could live there. But what we were told was, the Vatican apartments, the papal apartments are just too plush. They're too posh for my humility. So he lives in a 5-star hotel instead. College whiz. Those are the good times we live in. Like mafia heads, says John Paul Sandoval. Exactly. That's exactly right. Colin, Jake, he's probably watched all Jim's movies alone up in the snowy woods. Who's he talking about, Jake? What is that about? Colin, Jake, he's probably watched.
We're wondering why we didn't think White Wolf would be a Jim Carrey fan, but he said he was watching Dumb and Dumber. So
Dumb and Dumber.
I think I told you that Christopher Nolan's favorite movie to watch is Talladega Nights, right?
Christopher Nolan,
who made all these kind of highbrow popular films, highbrow compared to most movies these days.
Yeah,
loves Talladega.
That's not all that surprising, but it is funny. Somehow I wasn't surprised that he would love a dumb comedy, while spending his time making these finely crafted, whether they're great or not sometimes. But I'm sad that his casting for the Odyssey adaptation is just immediately writes that film off. It's all terrible.
Oh yeah, no, that movie I think is him just. Oh, he's making the Odyssey with Zendaya in it.
Yeah, I think what he's doing, I think he's paying his debt for them letting him finally win an Oscar. I think that's what he's doing.
Yeah.
What?
They finally let him win an Oscar for Oppenheimer, and now he has to go make his woke casting adaptation of a Western classic. So,
Adelaide,
by the way,
you're not on fire, Ricky Bobby.
This came hot on the heels of a a good rumor coming out of Hollywood that turned out to not be true, that he was going to do a trilogy of James Bond movies set in the 60s starring Henry Cavill. And everybody who likes those kind of movies was like, oh, tell me more.
That would have been great.
You would like some money? Here, have some money. Here, you want to make a $2 billion movie? That's your $2 billion movie.
Yeah, no kidding.
Could you imagine $2 billion to make
Instead,
a
we're putting
film?
Zendaya. Actually, let's go look at the cast of this, because this is just hilarious. Let's see. I'll take a look here, because why not? We need another good laugh. All right, let's take a look at the cast. Who has he got? He has Tom Holland, Elliot Page,
Yeah.
No.
Zendaya,
No.
Anne Hathaway, Charlize Theron, John Bernthal,
Of course.
Juan Leguizamo, because, we got to make sure that all the Latinos that were in the Odyssey are represented.
Uh-huh.
Himesh Patel and Lupita Nyong'o are all in the Odyssey.
That's
Terrible.
crazy. What a terrible cast.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of Charlize Theron, what's her name?
Charlize.
Charlize
Theron. Yeah.
That just reminded me. So I put out a call a couple of days ago about South Africa, and I asked for some guest suggestions. I have been trying to pursue some of those suggestions to see if I can't get a guest on in regards to South Africa and the kill the boer, kill the farmer chants that are going on down there, and the genocide that's going on down there. But so far, nobody's taken me up on the deal. So getting a good guest who understands and maybe boots on the ground, that's kind of what I was hoping for. So as of right now, not a single one has come back and said, yeah, I'm on the team. I'll be on the show. So I am working on it. But as of right now, I have no good guest to bring onto the show. So pray that I get one, because that would be good to raise awareness about what is going on in South Africa right now. It seems rather crazy to me. But if we follow the policy that we give to Israel, I would say we have to give the land back to not the Zulus that are chanting "Kill the Boer." We got to give it back to the tribe before them, right? Because that's who was there before the Zulus, and then who was there before even that tribe?
What I understand of the history of South Africa, take it with a grain of salt, but from what I understand is there was empty land when the Dutch showed up, or the Danish, or whoever. That it was the attraction of modern amenities, the 17th century, that attracted the indigenous African populations from further north to come down to South Africa.
Right.
That's as I understand it. And if that's the actual history there, then you've got a really big problem on your hands with the international community just sort of siding against the Afrikaners.
Yes, that's my point. I guess that's what the point I'm making is. It's hypocritical. It's just all hypocritical anyway, when we make these arguments that just because a people once lived a place isn't necessarily a reason to make sure that they get it back and everybody else has to leave and or die. I mean, that doesn't follow. That doesn't track. But nonetheless, that's what we're dealing with in our modern politics. The burden is sweet. Native Irish for Ireland? Anyone? Well, which natives are we talking about here? The Celts or the ones that were before them?
There's 2.8 to 3.5 million Afrikaners in South Africa. That's why I think Trump is offering them essentially refugee status to come here. Do you imagine if you move that population who's getting a firsthand look at what race communism looks like and move them to California? You move to California as farmers,
man. But
with all that beautiful water.
But then, are you giving into the battle then at that point? Shouldn't they stay and fight? I was watching one lady yesterday, and she was talking about how the farmers have decided to fight to the death, and they're preparing for it. It's like one last fight to the death. And do you get up and leave? Like all the people who are protesting in California, with Mexican flags against the Trump immigration policy. Why don't they go back to Mexico and make it a great place to live? You know what I mean? Like, I get why you want to come to America. I don't fault you for wanting to come to America. There's great opportunity here. It really is. It really is great opportunity, despite our flaws. But why don't?
But I do get the point with the Mexican and Central American population who are parading with their national pride, but cry about how their lives are over if you send them back to the place they have national pride in. It's kind of a disconnect.
It's a total disconnect. It makes no sense to me.
This isn't
Mexico
like the
could be a
legal
great
migrants
place.
who come here. Did you ever see King of the Hill? Another pop culture reference. But King of the Hill, that old show, the animated show. There was that Filipino character who was an immigrant and was nauseatingly patriotic to the point of it being almost a caricature. I have met migrants like that who were ultra red, white, and blue compared to typical conservative patriotic Americans. And partially because they came from places where they got here were practically kissing the ground once they were given citizenship.
Right.
They knew how lucky they were. And that's the flip side of the migration question. Is sometimes you'll get migrants who assimilate and live as better Americans than anybody else. But then again, what does it mean to be a better American? Because there are Latino migrants who come here, leave the Catholic faith within like a year of arriving, and join some evangelical Spanish language Pentecostal church. And that's something we should be opposed to as well, because that's no bueno.
Yeah.
Plenty of those churches up here in the Tulsa area.
Hey, Patrick. So God gave the land to Israel in a covenant, which is what we've been discussing. And tonight is the last session of our Bible study. We're going to wrap it all up, but we've been discussing it quite extensively in the covenants that God entered into with the people of Israel, the multiple covenants, Sinai being one of the more significant ones, but Abraham is when he promises them the land. He swears 3 covenants with Abraham in particular, one of which is the land. But that covenant has been fulfilled and is brought into its perfection in Jesus. And Jesus, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, who is now the successor to David, his father, which is a fulfillment of 2 Samuel chapter 7. Now Jesus, the fulfillment of this covenant, is the inheritor of the land. It is through Jesus that we get the blessing of all nations, which is also the fulfillment of the Abrahamic covenant. So Jesus founds only one church. That church, the ecclesia, that church is the Catholic Church. It has the 4 marks, one holy, Catholic, and apostolic. And that is now the chosen people who have the chosen land, the promised land, if you will, the land of milk and honey. The church is the chosen people of God. The church is the inheritor of the land, and the church should be governing the Holy Land in particular. The fact that we have given that over so free willy-nilly, God knew we would do it, and he's using that. He's using our free will to bring about his greater ends, and we might say the end of time, through the Antichrist and the rebuilding of the third temple, whatever day that happens in the future. It wasn't because he forced us to do it. It's because we chose to do it. When England gave up its patrimony in the church to abandon truth itself in the Protestant Reformation under Henry VIII, well, the ultimate end of the consequence to that choice was secularism, atheism. And that's where they're at as a country right now. It's something I talked about yesterday with Gavin Ashenden. So when England gave the Holy Land back to Israel, that land should still be governed by the chosen people, which has been given that land, which is the church. It's like I said yesterday, and I keep repeating, I'm all right with the Israelis living there. They should live in peace there under the governance of Christendom. And they should be encouraged to convert to the one Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, because that is, in fact, the will of God. It's demonstrable. And it's not because I say so or want it to be one way or the other. It's because that's what it is. That's what God has revealed. That is his will. So what should be is Christendom governs the Holy Land, allows them. In fact, my book from the Church, the Liberty and Culture points this out. Bishop Spalding, late 19th century, he talks about this extensively in this book. In taking a survey of Catholic countries versus Protestant countries. In Catholic countries, Protestants fare way better under Catholic rule than Catholics do under Protestant rule. And that, I think the principle is the same here. A Catholic-run Israel would be better for Israelis and Muslims in the long run than an Israeli-run Holy Land. So,
or a Protestant-run Holy Land, because you think about what would happen if the Protestants were the ones governing Israel. You'd get the apocalyptic, we're in charge now. First thing we're going to do is build that third temple. Force Jesus to come back. So we've got to bind the contract in the former century.
Right. Like, oh my heavens. Please stop.
This is why
Please
people sometimes wonder when I sarcastically will post on X or on Facebook, that Protestants believe that some Protestants believe that Jesus founded the church on the Rock of Peter, but then the Catholic Church got corrupted and went underground, and the true faith was underground, held secretly by a few people, and then Jesus was so very lucky to have Martin Luther and Henry VIII and other men of unimpeachable moral character restore the church for him. It's 1,500 years later, because there are Protestants who believe that. It's not much of a caricature; they believe that nonsense.
Yes, they do. By the way, we're going to be running out of time here in just a few minutes with Dr. Stein. We're going to say goodbye, but Father Murr is back on the team tomorrow. We're going to get him to weigh in on some of these big stories, these controversies within Holy Mother Church. And, the last point I kind of want to get into before we do say goodbye is what I've been saying I think is coming is it's a civil war. It's a division that we've seen for a long time now within the church, but I think it's going to become very obvious, even at suburban Nova Soto-Goran parishes. It's going to be you're either on the team 100% or you're off. And by that, I mean, like, look at this new archbishop in Detroit. Already, he's first day on the job, he's already throwing out the word excommunication to refer to anybody in the Trump administration that's Catholic who dares to enforce the law. So I think we're going to have to live with those terms. I'm going to have to come to grips emotionally with being called excommunicated or being schismatic. Like, these words are going to be thrown about carelessly, flippantly, and frequently. And I'm going to have to learn to live with those and ignore them.
Because you will refuse to go along with their materialist new religion, because that's what this is.
Yeah.
This isn't the gospel. This is something else.
So do you think that civil war is happening in the Nova Soto parishes? That's, I guess, that out and out. Do you think it's happening at that level yet?
I don't know yet, but we'll find out. I mean, my connections to Nova Soto parishes are pretty tenuous at this point. I go to confession at the neighborhood one, and that's about it. But the neighborhood one that I go to for that is very conservative. The priest is the kind of priest who could you get the vibe from him that he's an Eastern Orthodox looking power lifter. Okay, the guy's got a beard and is built like a freaking beer barrel. You get he put up a sign that says no phones in the confessional, and he plays like Gregorian chant on a boombox outside the confessional. Which is a nice touch, actually. It helps to keep the chatter down in the line, all that stuff. And the kind of priest you get the feeling would offer the traditional mass if the bishop would let him.
Yeah.
So I don't know, because you have a lot of younger priests who are the Father Young trads, even if they're not allowed to be trads. They're still the Father Young trad stereotype, as opposed to a Father Old Lib, right? You get the Father Old Lib who's like prancing around and celebrating the local football team or whatever.
Right.
Or,
I know it.
LGBT ministries in his parish or something.
Yeah, and I didn't watch the football game, but I did watch that. By the way, did you also see there was that footage out yesterday? There was lately, the guy who attacked the high altar at St. Peter's. That video went around over the weekend, and then there was another video yesterday of some guy some guy attacking a priest with a knife, and then stabbed the knife into the altar.
I saw that this morning, but I didn't get a chance to really watch it. Was that up in Canada or was it the U.S.? I think that was in Canada.
Canada. I don't remember. I didn't understand why, what his deal was. Let me see if I can find that video. Oh yeah, it's right here. Hold on. Let me pull this over. Right here. Hold on. Give me 1 second. Let me put this on. Let me back this up. Winnipeg. This is a strong argument. I think what we're seeing here is this guy in the yellow jacket with his knife. He's trying to make an argument that says, hold on, your altar is made of wood? What are we talking about? You should have a marble altar. I think that's probably his only point, was to say, you aren't mission territory anymore, buddy. You're not supposed to have these wooden altars. You're supposed to have a stone marble altar. I'm guessing that's what his argument was. But
I would disagree with that. Canada, just like the United States, is very much mission territory again. Very much mission territory again.
Maybe he just hated, the Novus-Ordo altar. Who knows? I don't know what his motivation was. No idea.
Maybe what happened just before that was a Marty Haugen tomb, and the guy snapped.
No, it was the ladies singing the union labor song. That's what it was. And he was like, I can take no more of it. I can have no more of this. I'm not in the labor union. I don't want to be in the labor union. And I can't handle it. But like, was he really going to stab the priest? Like, really? Like, he chased the guy.
And
the
remember, it's Canada where people still believe that nuns and Catholic monks and things killed a ton of kids and buried them in mass graves at their school sites. People still believe that, even though all the independent investigators came out and said, no, that was a hoax. That did not happen.
Right.
The graveyards you have there are because it was the 19th century and childhood mortality was a thing. The number of graves there, compared to the records of the number of students they have there, shows that nothing out of the ordinary was happening here.
Right. Yeah.
People still, but because Francis endorsed the hoax.
Yes, I had Kennedy Hall on to talk about all that a few times, actually. That's the world we live in. So, golly gee whiz, fanning the flame of crazy people. You know, you don't have to go out and do violence, but you can fan their flames and they'll do it for you. Just like the guy in South Africa chanting, kill the Boyer, kill the white man, shoot him. Like the whole crowd, the stadium chanting this. Is there any reason why we shouldn't believe that there is, in fact, a genocide going on down there? I really want to get somebody on to talk about that, but I'm working on it. Hey, Dr. Anthony Stein, I appreciate your time on the subject and conversations today, despite the fact you sound like you got a cold. We're going to be praying for you. ReturnToTradition.org is his website. Check it out. If you haven't done so already, I'd be surprised. But Father Charles Murray will be back tomorrow morning on the show. Until then, God bless you. God love you. We'll see you in the Bible study tonight.